into the episode. For those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop your comments down below, share the video with your friends, anyone that you think might be interested. It all helps with the algorithms. And for those listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcasting platforms, please follow, give us a 5-star review or any review. That also helps get the podcast out to more people on those audio platforms. So we'll get straight into the previews for the Premier League games coming up this weekend. We've got Arsenal versus Nottingham Forest on Saturday, 3 p.m. And then Manchester United travelling to Ipswich Town for Ruben Amorim's first game of his reign on Sunday at 4:30. So we'll start off with the Arsenal game. Obviously, you guys have been struggling a bit for form. I don't think you've won a Premier League game in 4 or 5 or something like that. A couple of defeats, a couple of draws. Last time out, 1-1 draw at Stamford Bridge with Chelsea. How are you feeling generally, Jonts? Have you kind of got your groove back, kind of recovered a bit? Because it was a bit of doom and gloom, wasn't it, for the Arsenal fans over the last month or so? So how are you feeling now with the international break come and gone? Do you feel any better about the team?
I mean, I don't feel any better, but I do feel just happy that we haven't had like any further injuries through the international break, because it's really the international break that has appeared to screw us for injuries this season so far. So it's just nice to come out of the back of that with no like major injuries to any of our players. Obviously with Saka and a lot of the other England players kind of pulling out, there was never going to be any doubt about Saka's fitness, hopefully. But, all of our other players that are going away for the international break, there's always a bit of a worry. So, it's also been nice, I think, for the Arsenal fans, at least speaking for myself, to not have to think about it as much over the last couple of weeks. It's been doom and gloom for the last 4 or 5 weeks before that, as you kind of mentioned. And obviously as a result, you can get kind of down on yourself and you can build up some negative momentum. So it's just been nice to not have to think about it. But obviously now coming back, we've got a pretty difficult game in Nottingham Forest, who, I said it at the beginning of the season, don't concede goals, man. And really hard to break down and have a pretty exciting attack. So it's going to be a difficult game, but, I'm still hopeful that this little break, I'm hoping like one of them trips. Do you remember when Arteta took our team on a trip? I think it was in the January break. He took us to like Dubai, took our team to like Dubai or whatever it was, and we came back really refreshed and looked good. So I haven't heard any rumours of us going on trips, but I'm just hoping that getting everyone back to the training ground, just regrouping, letting people get some rest, maybe has been enough to kind of refresh the team.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, but I am going to be the bearer of bad news, because there were a couple of injury reports coming out after this international break. First, it was Ben White, right? The revelation that Ben White has been playing injured for the last
but I mean that wasn't caused by
that
wasn't caused by internationals, right? That was just something that came out just before the internationals actually started, right?
Yeah, but Trossard was.
Trossard, I don't mind.
There's rumours that
Trossard, I don't mind.
Man's just ignoring certain injuries.
What I'm talking is Odegaard, Saka, Saliba, Gabriel.
Your main,
right? Rice.
Yeah.
None of you got get injured. I'm cool. But if I'm seeing Trossard get injured, he's been stinking it up recently anyway.
Yeah,
but I'm not happy that he's injured. Right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like it's not one of our core like spine of the team. Let's say, in my opinion.
Yeah, it shouldn't put you in at a major deficit, because he's not one of your necessarily like top 5 key players. You've seen in the last month or so when Odegaard's been out, Trossard has kind of been the main person who's benefited from that injury, and he didn't really take his chance with both hands. So you've got Odegaard back. Trossard, it doesn't look like a major injury from what the reports are saying. It looks like it's something minor and he'll only be out for a few weeks. But it's still, a couple of spots in that starting 11 that you've been playing over the last few weeks that you've got to replace. Obviously, Ben White. What's your take on that Ben White one? Because I've seen a few Arsenal fans quite upset with this news, because it kind of feels like you've been playing him while he's been injured. And there's that whole medical departments. We talked about it before, right? Like they catch a lot of flack when you get a spate of injuries, and this one it seems or sounds like he's kind of been a bit mismanaged. What do you make of the Ben White injury as a whole?
No, he hasn't been mismanaged. That's bollocks. It's very clear that we've had a lot of injuries to our backline in terms of the people that should be playing instead of him, right? To give him a rest. So people like Tomiyasu, I love him, but he can't stay fit to save his life. Timber was obviously out for a large part of last season. Zinchenko absolutely stinks. We let go of some subpar right backs, left backs. In Tierney and I've forgotten the other guy's name, but the one that got hooked at half time or subbed on and then subbed back off again. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's mismanagement. I think it's risky, right? And I think it does end up sometimes in this situation. But I think if the alternative was that we would have to play, youth players or somebody else in those places instead of Ben White, who ended up being one of our best defenders last season. And as much as people want to try and call him out this season, our defense in general has not been great, right? And it hasn't been his fault that we haven't been great. So I think it's easy to just kind of get down on ourselves based off of the run of games that we've had and say, oh no, everything's falling apart. We're mismanaging players. We've just lost Edu. We're absolutely crap right now. It's just classic bloody melodramatic fan reaction to a slight down period. So I think it's rich to call it mismanagement. I think, we've, last season, the season before that, we barely had any injuries really to our core 11. Outside of maybe Saliba and some of his back problems, but they're then nothing really to do with the medical department. So now when we do get a couple of injuries, people like Man United fans, Liverpool fans, Man City fans, they cry about injuries all the time and they say Arsenal have never had it, tough. Now we have a couple of injuries out and everyone wants to say that our medical department stinks. It's stupid, right? He had minor surgery. He needed it. He's been one of our most durable players. He's also one of the players that gets stuck in the most out of all of the players in our team. And it's bound to happen at some point in the future, right? He hasn't got, an ACL, MCL, some like life-ending, career-ending, season-ending injury. He's had surgery because we've been playing him too much. We've got people like, Lewis Skelly and some other young people trying to come into the team. If this is the time where we just said we couldn't, we can't keep playing him, he needs to go and have the surgery, then fair play. He needs to go and have the surgery. I don't think it's mismanagement. I think that's a bit of a reach.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't really heard any rival fans talk about that with Ben White. It's kind of been some of the Arsenal content creators that have been a bit frustrated with the news, but I think that's just
as I said, melodramatic.
I think that's just
twats.
Yeah, I think that's definitely heavily influenced by the recent run of results. Like if you guys have been winning, or if things weren't as doom and gloom as they've been painted to be in the last month, I think people will kind of just accept. He's a major part of your team, but your defense is probably the most stacked area of your team. So while Tomiyasu's perennially injured, and I agree, man's got to show up some point, right? He's got to get over things. You've got quite a decent amount of cover. So if it means he's got to sit on the sidelines for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is, and get better, and you solve the problem instead of having him in and out, then I think that's the right call. So I think it's it is like you say, people just will jump from one to the other depending on kind of what the current narrative is. But yeah, I think White's definitely a bigger miss than Trossard, because I think Odegaard coming back in, I think most Arsenal fans and most objective football fans would pick Odegaard over Trossard, right, as a player. And as a person and a player with the impact on your team, you saw him against Chelsea. Automatically, you guys played a lot better with Odegaard in there than you had been with Trossard in there. So let's see how your team lines up. Who do you expect to replace them in the lineup? Do you expect Odegaard to come straight in for Trossard, and who do you think will take White's spot at right back?
I imagine that Timber will come in at right back. Calafiori, it looks like he's fit again, so he'll probably come in at left back. And then I expect to see a Rice, Partey, Odegaard, like central midfield, let's say, and then Saka, Havertz, Martinelli. So I don't think there's going to be some major challenge to overcome. I think that's a pretty strong 11.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would argue. Some people, White and Timber's probably the only contentious swap out you might have to your strongest starting 11, right? With those replacements. So in theory,
White to Timber.
these injuries. Yeah, I meant like
Oh yeah,
if
no,
White
yeah,
was at
yeah.
right back.
Based off of like last year's form,
Mm,
yeah, White to Timber would be the one that you'd question because obviously White was on absolute fire.
yeah,
But I mean, Timber's
yeah, White was
been
great.
good.
Yeah,
I've been very
no, Timber's been good.
impressed
Yeah,
by Timber. He just needs to stay
yeah,
fit. That's my
yeah,
main worry about him.
yeah. I think the only downside to Timber that I think has kind of been found out in the last couple of weeks is he's really good defensively. He's really good on the ball. He hasn't quite worked out or hasn't been given the license to overlap and stuff. So when you see him at left back,
Yeah,
I guess
but
that's
I
because
think
he's
that's
right
kind of
footed.
natural.
You don't get the same as Calafiori, right? When Calafiori plays left back, for those handful of games, he was bombing forward, man. I was loving it. As a neutral fan, when you were taking on City, I thought he was great. There were a couple of other games where he was really
Yeah,
giving, whether it was Martinelli or Trossard, that a lot of support that you've kind of associated with White and Saka on the other side. So you'll see now, maybe Timber on the right hand side being a right footer will offer that when he's at left
but I think you
back.
also
You
have to
can't
remember
really
that
offer that
Timber
because of the
like is was also naturally more of a central player anyway, right? Like he can play in many different
yeah,
positions, but he's able to play in a DM position, a centre back position, and he can basically play on either flank. And I think we've tried to play him more before as like an inverted fullback, right? Because he's good on the
yeah,
ball, kind of in that Zinchenko-ish kind of way. He's probably not as good on the ball as Zinchenko in terms of creativity, but he's good enough to kind of get away with that position. But as you say, I don't know if he's as confident or as comfortable or as used to playing out on the wide, the wide flanks and, overlapping and so on and so forth. So that will be interesting to see. But obviously, like this season, we've also played like Partey at right back as well. I don't know if we necessarily want to have two bombing right and left backs. I don't know if we necessarily want both. We sometimes want, on in possession, maybe to play with three at the back and have one of the either left or right back kind of go up a bit. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily in Arteta's plans to be playing kind of Klopp type football where he's got right back, left back, bombing down the wings. And as a result, you can sometimes see the effect on either Saka or Martinelli, depending on which one goes forward. So it's evolved. The way that we play football's evolved, right? In 22-23, I think we did play a lot more like that, right? And Saka and Martinelli, I think, both benefited from it. And then last year, you saw Saka benefited more from White having, that kind of license. But you saw Martinelli kind of suffer because he didn't have kind of that Xhaka support on the left-hand side to help him out. So I think it really depends on how we want to play, but it doesn't seem like we're happy to play with two bombing right and left backs. It doesn't make sense to me even why though, if we've got Partey that can kind of sit in front of the centre backs. I just think it's maybe Arteta's style. He doesn't necessarily want to play with that way, but it does negatively affect our wingers, I guess, depending on who starts.
yeah. I agree. It affects the one that doesn't have that overlap for sure. Which last season was more likely Martinelli. But yeah, I mean, you can make some tweaks. Obviously, you could drop Partey back into defence when you don't have the ball or you lose the ball to make up the three if you've got the two bombing wing backs or full backs overlapping. But yeah, obviously
The
Arteta's been
only
going for more of the one fullback overlap, one kind of invert to make up the numbers, which City have been doing for ages as well. So I get it. It's what you've
and
been doing for the
to
most
add to
part.
that too, I think when Odegaard is back, he tends to hang around Saka more, if that makes sense. He hangs out on that right hand side, does the little cutting in, tries to do the little cutbacks, like where he runs one way and then tries to do kind of a little right angle pass back into Saka, who's kind of going back behind the left back. So as a result, I think maybe because the big problem that we've got is that if Saka's left alone and he doesn't have White like bombing down the right hand side, he just gets double teamed, right? And everyone was crying about Cucurella's performance last time. I think he was good, but he also had double, triple teams on Saka at almost all times, right? And as a result, Saka kind of he can't deal with three defenders at the same time. And if he doesn't have somebody bombing down the right hand side to kind of take one of those defenders away, it limits his options. Whereas when Odegaard is back, he didn't necessarily do it in that Chelsea game, but in a lot of games before, and I've seen some Arsenal fans actually complain about this, he does tend to hang around a lot more on Saka's side. And to the point where some Arsenal fans, like No New Thing and all these guys on Twitter kind of complain about Odegaard stifling Saka's space. So maybe that's another thing. Like if Calafiori is going to go out and provide an option for Martinelli to distract, some of the defenders, maybe Odegaard's going to hang around on that right-hand side and try and do the same thing for Saka, and then have Timber, the back three kind of stay in the way they are. So that's just me theorizing. I'm not going to act like I'm some sort of tactico, but that could be another reason why we don't want to play, I guess, two right and left backs going up too much.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that too. I think that it's a double edged sword though, because I understand there might be moments where Odegaard might be seen to stifle Saka when he does drift out on that right hand side a lot, but I think some of your best players come when that little triangle of Saka, White, and Odegaard has been on that side, with White overlapping and Odegaard playing little intricate balls between the three of them. So I can only see a benefit of that, and I think mirroring it on the left hand side could also work with a Rice, Martinelli, and a Calafiori. But then you would need to have probably a bit more of a mobile DM to do that, and probably Partey's not at that stage right now, being the age and kind of physical state he's in right now. So maybe that's a future development if you were to get like a more of a Rodri type kind of all out one man DM, which there aren't many of these days. If you could find someone that could cover the yards, maybe you could do that. But I agree, you'll need to. I doubt Arteta will go for two overlapping fullbacks. He'll definitely try and find a bit more balance to make sure you don't, leave yourself too open. But it should be interesting.
And I think that was his intention. Well, I was just going to say that I think that was his intention with purchasing Marino, though. I feel like he wasn't trying to go for Partey long term, and he seems to like Rice in that sixth position. So I thought he was trying to go for Rice and then having Marino in front with Odegaard in the 10. And I'm looking at a heat map of Odegaard from last season. Like he spent almost all of his time right next to Saka. So I imagine that was what Arteta's intention was this season with Marino. But I don't know if Marino's necessarily bedded in as quickly as he should. Big shocker there. And also Partey's played really well. Like, on the pitch only. I'm not going to talk anything about off the pitch because it's quite clearly my man's got some real big problems, and I don't know what Arsenal are doing at this point, but try and keep my man around. But on the pitch specifically, he has been good this season. So I bet maybe that's kind of throwing a bit of a spanner into the works too. But to answer your other question on how do I think the game's going to go, I see it being cagey, man. I think Nottingham Forest are not an easy team to break down. They've got what it looks like a really nice kind of centre-back pairing right now. I'm really liking this, was it Milinkovic, Murillo kind of pairing. And then you've got Ola Aina, who looks really good. They got Moreno, what they got him from Villa. Is it from Villa that they got Alex Moreno, right? They look really nice. Then they've got bloody Yates, who's just an absolute thug, just going in, elbowing, kicking, doing whatever he can to people in the middle. He's kind of like their version of a Joe Linton. And then you've got some Dons that can actually play with the ball quite nicely in front of that, right? With Elanga, Morgan Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi. And then you've just got a gunman that doesn't really look like he can play with the ball very much, but seems to be able to smash it into the back of the net in Chris Wood, who got, I believe, a hat-trick for New Zealand during this international break. So good for my FPL team, but bad for my the team that I support in terms of him performing well. So I don't know how it's going to go. I think it's going to be a cagey one. I think they're going to be difficult to break down. I think it's going to be physical game. And that worries me a little bit because, I think Rice has got like a injured toe. It affected him during the Chelsea game. If he tries to play again, I don't want to see what Yates is going to try and do to my man's toe. Then you've got people like Calafiori who basically just coming back from injury. Timber who's just basically coming back from injury. Even Odegaard too. So, I mean, Partey, Havertz are going to have to be throwing elbows, mate. I need Saliba, Gabriel, Partey, Rice. Maybe not Rice, but Havertz really swinging it around. I need them to be physical. I need them to try and dominate. And then I need people like Saka, Martinelli, and Odegaard really to just play them off the park and just overdo it with the quality. But yeah, I think it's going to be a cagey one. I honestly don't know which way it's going to go. Obviously, I'm going to back my team, but I'll go for like a I'll go for a 1-0 win from
Yeah,
us.
I don't think that's a bad shout. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a slog. This is a terrible game back from after international duty. Not because I think Forest are the best team in the world, but styles make fights, and the matchup on this is a rough one, especially after the international break. Not because I don't think you guys are physical, not because I don't think you guys can swing elbows and do the dark arts. We're talking about dark arts FC, right? With Arsenal, that's what everyone says. But I think it's more likely the state, the physical state and condition that some of your players are in coming into this. Um, like you mentioned, Rice with his toe. Odegaard's literally just come back from his recent injury, and I feel like he was kind of expedited a little bit because of the other injuries you had to get him onto the pitch at Chelsea and to play for as long as he did. Backline is normally super resolute, but like you said, Timber, Calafiori both been out injured recently as well. So it's going to be a big test. I'll say that because Nuno has turned Forest into 2024 Wolves that he used to have, where you knew it was going to be a low scoring game and you were going to have to just like out muscle them, and they were going to be super disciplined, and they had that little sprinkling of a little bit of stardust here and there. Jimenez and Ruben Neves and those guys that they used to have at Wolves, their current equivalent is Chris Wood, like you said up front, and Gibbs White in behind, with flying wingers Hudson Odoi, Alanga, like you mentioned, and that really steely defence. I love that centre back pairing, man. Murillo and Milenkovic, and they weren't bought for a lot of money either. It's really good recruitment from them. And Edu,
And
when he
Sells
takes
in
over
goal as
Nottingham
well.
Forest, will be looking. He's decent, yeah. He's decent.
Sells in goal
He's
looks decent as well. I know that's a
Yeah,
weird
he's
one as well
decent.
because
I
they've
think
had some weird goalkeepers over the last few years. With like, was it like Keylor Navas for a bit, and then they had like what is it, Matt Turner? Like
yeah,
they've had some mental like
they've had
goalkeeping
some
decisions over
stinkers.
the last couple of years. But Sells looks good.
Yeah, yeah. He's and I'll be honest, you make a good point. Like they had Navas, who was actually decent for them, but it was just a
Yeah,
really weird
it was a weird
move.
one. Yeah,
Like it was one of those football manager, when you're in your 15th season type situation where people start going to all kind of random teams. Um, but he was decent for them. But then they had like you said, Matt Turner, Vlachodimos or whatever his name is, the Greek goalie from Olympiacos, which I'm pretty sure was just like a bit of a like
didn't they have
FFP
Dean
kind of
Anderson
move
as
the money
well?
around type deal. They had Dean Henderson on loan, from United for
Yeah,
a little period. And now they've got Sells, who I never really rated, and he had a little stint at Newcastle and he didn't look that good, but now he's come back in his early 30s, late 20s, and he looks like a proper keeper. So yeah, they've got a really resolute team, man. Like you said, also Ola Aina, who's really good on FPL, by the way. He's bombing forward, getting assists, getting goals, and he's always part of that back line that gets a lot of clean sheets. So bloody hell, mate, the more I'm talking about it, I think it's going to be it's going to be a battle, and I
and
think it will be
fun stat for you.
really hard.
Let me pull out one fun stat for you. Right, they've played 8 games this season where it's either been 1-0 or 1-1. 8 of their games this season have been 1-0 or 1-1, and they've been on the best side, like the positive side of most of those results. They've had a couple of games where it was like tense with like Brighton, I think 2-2, and then recently like they pumped, what was it, West Ham 3-1 or whatever it is. They've had some more high scoring games recently, but like the amount of 1-1s and 1-0s I'm seeing, it's mental. So I mean, given our defensive record and then our attacking record this season where we can barely score a goal, I just feel like it's either a 1-1 or a 1-0 written all over it, innit?
Yeah, I think but they are coming. The only thing that gives me, other than the fact I think you're a better team than them, right? So you should win. If you look at just the last game they played as well, they did get battered at home by Newcastle. Yeah. And even though Newcastle are a bit of a like bogey team for them, I think, although I think last season they did a double. I think Chris Wood went up to St James's Park and banged a hat trick against them, which was hilarious. But But I think Newcastle, they're capable of like pulling off a shock away at some of these grounds, which are more difficult.
And they were also coming
go
off of
to,
beating
'cause-
us. So I think they were on a bit of
Yeah.
a high.
Yeah, and Newcastle probably one of the only teams that can go toe to toe with them physically. So
Yes, exactly.
I think they could maybe outmuscle them with that midfield. But I think that you never know. Maybe they come into this game a little bit down, and the wind is out of their sails a little bit after taking that defeat at home to Newcastle. But regardless of that, I still think it's going to be a low scoring game. I still expect you guys to win, and I'm going to be slightly more adventurous than 1-0 or 1-1. So I'm going to go for you guys to win 2-0, but I do think it's going to be like really tight. Like maybe you score a goal, early in the second half, and then it becomes really tense, and you nick one in the final 10 minutes or so to seal the deal. But I don't think it will be. There might be some tense moments as well where Raya has to pull some big saves, and keep you in some games, which he's done plenty of times this season, but. I think you'll do enough to get the win and lift the mood a bit, and hopefully, the other results go in your favour, and you can make up some ground on City and Liverpool. All right, so we've locked in our predictions. You've gone 1-0, right, Arsenal, and I've gone 2-0 Arsenal.